Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Ellen Greenberg case. These are my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. What if the weight of daily pressures builds so quietly that it shifts someone's entire sense of self, leading to actions that seem out of character? That's the first psychological red flag we need to consider here. The subtle escalation of anxiety that can alter behavior without clear warning. Ellen Greenberg was a 27-year-old first-grade teacher living in Philadelphia. She shared an apartment with her fiancé, Samuel Goldberg. And on January 26, 2011, a blizzard hit the city, keeping many people indoors. Ellen and Sam were at home that afternoon. Sam left to go to the gym around 4:45 p.m., and when he returned about 30 minutes later, he found the door locked from the inside with a swing bar latched. He called out to Ellen, but got no response. After trying to get in and calling neighbors for help, he broke down the door. Inside, he found Ellen on the kitchen floor, slumped against the cabinets. A 10-inch serrated knife was lodged in her chest. She had 20 stab wounds in total. 10 were to the back of her neck and head, and the other 10 were to her chest and stomach. One wound went through her heart, and another penetrated her spinal cord. There were also 11 bruises on her body in different stages of healing. Paramedics arrived and pronounced her dead at 6:40 p.m. The scene showed no signs of forced entry besides the broken door, and the apartment appeared undisturbed. As a counselor, I look at how stress can manifest in isolation. Ellen had started showing signs of withdrawal from her social circle months earlier, which raises the second red flag. When someone pulls back from friends and routines, is it a signal of deeper emotional turmoil brewing beneath the surface? Friends noticed Ellen becoming more reserved, starting in November 2010. She stopped making plans as often and seemed preoccupied with work worries. She taught at Juniata Park Academy, dealing with challenging students and administrative changes, and these pressures seemed to weigh on her. Her parents, Joshua and Sandy, recalled her expressing a desire to move back home to Harrisburg. She felt something wasn't right in her life. In early January 2011, she began seeing a psychiatrist over 3 sessions on January 12th, January 17th, and January 19th. She discussed her anxiety. The diagnosis was adjustment disorder with anxiety. She was first prescribed Zoloft, but then it didn't help, so she switched it to a low dose of Xanax, and then to Ambien for sleep and Klonopin for anxiety. Considering the role of medication adjustments, here's the third psychological red flag. How do rapid changes in prescriptions affect mood stability, potentially amplifying feelings of unease or disconnection? Ellen told her psychiatrist that she felt insecure and unsure of herself, traits that weren't typical for her. She had always been described as outgoing and dedicated to her students. But in those final weeks, she confided in her mother about not liking how she felt, and her parents encouraged therapy, hoping it would help her decide whether to stay in her job or come home. The wedding planning with Sam added another layer. They were set to marry in August 2011, but sources indicate she had stopped wearing her engagement ring at times. This could point to relational stress, though details remain private. In my experience as a therapist, upcoming life changes like marriage can intensify existing anxieties if unresolved issues linger. The initial investigation by Philadelphia police treated the scene as suspicious. Assistant medical examiner ruled the death a homicide on January 27, 2011. But then, after discussions with police and a neuropathologist, a medical examiner changed it to suicide on February 17, 2011. The neuropathologist suggested Ellen could have remained conscious long enough to inflict all of the wounds, even those to her neck and head. This shift in the ruling puzzled many. From a psychological perspective, the fourth psychological question emerges here. What does it mean when physical evidence challenges our understanding of human capability in moments of extreme stress? Self-inflicted wounds and suicides often show hesitation marks, shallow cuts before deeper ones. Here, some wounds were superficial, but others were deep in the hard-to-reach areas. Experts hired by the family argue the wounds to the back of the neck and spinal cord injury could have caused immediate incapacity. This raises questions about whether some could continue stabbing themselves after such damage. The bruises on her arm, abdomen, and leg were various healing stages. Some of these were fresh, others older. In mental health terms, bruises could stem from accidents or self-harm, but without context, they add to the behavioral puzzle. Ellen's computer showed browser searches for painless suicide methods in the weeks before. However, her family questions if she made those searches or if the computer was accessed by others. No suicide note was found, which is common in many cases, but notable here given the circumstances. And about those digital footprints, the fifth red flag here is how do online searches reflect inner thoughts? Or could they indicate someone exploring options during a crisis without intent to follow through? Ellen had no prior history of suicide attempts or diagnosed depression. Her therapy focused on anxiety management, not suicidal ideation. Friends and family insist she wasn't suicidal. She had future plans like the wedding and her teaching career. Yet the official narrative leaned on her anxiety as a factor. Anxiety affects millions, often tied to life transitions, but it doesn't inherently lead them to self-harm. The locked door from inside suggests no intruder supporting the suicide ruling. Sam told police that he and Ellen hadn't argued that day. He cooperated with investigators and has never been charged. The family is focused on challenging the medical examiner's decision, not accusing individuals. As the years passed, the Greenbergs pursued legal action. They sued the city and the medical examiner's office in 2019 to change the death certificate. In 2021, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled families could challenge such certificates in court. By 2022, Chester County District Attorney Office reopened the investigation at the family's request. This brings us to the sixth psychological red flag. How does prolonged uncertainty impact the mental health of surviving members, turning grief into relentless search for closure? Joshua and Sandy have described the toll of fighting for answers. They've hired private investigators and experts facing repeated setbacks. In mental health, unresolved trauma can lead to complicated grief, where normal mourning extends to chronic distress. They publicly shared their belief that the scene was inconsistent with suicide. For instance, fruit on the counter was sliced but not eaten, and there was minimal blood splatter for such wounds. Blood was mostly pooled under her, with some smears, but no footprints tracked blood elsewhere. The knife had fruit residue on it, suggesting it was used for cutting produce before the incident. These details fueled debates. Psychologically, if it were self-inflicted, it might indicate a dissociative state where pain thresholds alter. Disassociation can occur in high-stress moments, detaching someone from reality. But that's speculative. And new developments have kept the case alive. In July 2024, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to review whether the manner of death can be challenged. Then in October 2025, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office reaffirmed the suicide ruling after reinvestigation. They cited Ellen's anxiety, insomnia, messages about quitting her job, and the hesitation wounds as supporting evidence. No defensive wounds were noted, which might occur in an attack. Yet the family's experts countered that the wound locations make self-infliction improbable. A renowned pathologist called it one of the most obvious homicides he's ever seen. This discrepancy highlights the seventh red flag here. Why do conflicting experts' opinions create doubt? And how does that affect our trust in systems meant to provide truth? In counseling, cognitive dissonance arises when facts don't align, leading to emotional conflict. For the family, this has meant years of advocacy. They pointed to potential mishandling, like the scene not being fully secured initially. Sam called 911 after finding her, reporting no pulse. He removed the knife at one point and then put it back. First responders noted the body was in rigor mortis, suggesting she had been dead for a while. The time of death estimates vary, but around 5 p.m. or so, surveillance footage from the building was reviewed but showed nothing unusual. Some footage was reportedly missing or not preserved. These gaps add layers to the mystery. Most recently, as of January 2026, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania has opened an investigation. Sources confirm subpoenas have been issued, probing possible corruption in the original handling by Philadelphia police, the DA's office, and even involving former Attorney General Josh Shapiro, now governor. The Greenbergs have expressed relief of this federal involvement, hoping for an unbiased review. They've made a public plea to Sam to cooperate fully, seeking any details he might provide. This development underscores the persistence required in such cases. Finally, the eighth red flag here is what motivates institutions to revisit closed cases, and how does public pressure influence mental health narratives in investigations. In my analysis, the psychology here revolves around vulnerability. Ellen's anxiety was real, but was it enough to explain the outcome? Adjustment disorder involves difficulty coping with stressors, often temporary, and with support, many recover. But if external factors amplified it, work, relationships, or something unseen, it could escalate. The bruises suggest possible prior incidents, though it's unexplained. In victimology, patterns of injury can indicate abuse, but no evidence supports that here. If homicide, the psychology might involve staging a scene to mimic suicide, requiring calculation and detachment. But without charges, we focus on the known behaviors. The locked door implies intimacy with the setting, no theft or sexual assault signs. The why here, if suicide, could tie to the overwhelming despair in the moment. If not, it points to a betrayal's deep impact. Piecing the clues here, the medications might have side effects like confusion or agitation, especially during switches. Clozapine and Ambien can cause drowsiness or paradoxical reactions. Her last therapy session was a week before. She seemed to be managing, per records. Yet that day after the blizzard, something shifted. The aha moment comes when considering capability. Could anxiety alone lead to 20 wounds, or does it reveal a different story? Experts debate, but the federal probe may clarify. Respect for Ellen's memory is key. She was a devoted teacher and loved by her students. And her parents continue fighting, turning pain into purpose. This is a very, very intriguing case. In fact, this is my second video on this case. The fact that Ellen struggled with her mental health with anxiety and received that diagnosis of adjustment disorder with anxiety, it does not mean that she's suicidal at all. I have so many clients that have that exact same diagnosis, but it doesn't mean that they are suicidal. Ellen has shown no signs of being suicidal. Even the digital footprint in her computer searches, it indicated how to die harmless, without pain. Stabbing herself involves pain. This case is so bizarre, and it really seems like there may be some cover-up or maybe mishandling at best. The fact that the federal probe is starting to get into this case and re-examining it is very interesting. Kudos to Ellen's parents. This is so tragic, and they're trying to fight through their trauma and their grief to bring answers. Good for them. What did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.